And before I get too deep into the message, I do want to offer my condolences on behalf of myself and Pastor Yolanda and to the CSC family and to everyone who will be watching this. We know that our brothers and sisters here in New York, many lost their lives in the attack that took place on this week. And we are holding everyone in prayer, knowing that it's a process, knowing that as they are burying their loved ones and as they are looking for answers and clarity, that the light of love is the only thing that will hold and sustain them. So we do send our deep love and our true prayers, because we will pray. We always pray. We don't just talk about praying. Surrounding everyone that was affected and is affected in any way. Now, it's interesting when we look at the events that took place on Halloween, and we recognize that we live in a world now where things are different, right? We live in a world, we talk so often about the post-9/11 world. For myself, every time I go to an airport, I get a little annoyed, because I remember what it used to be like when we went to airports. Every time I take off my shoes, I'm a little annoyed, right? Now I realize, my daughter, she was born in 2001. This is her reality. She doesn't know any different, right? For the rest of her life, taking off her shoes at the airport is just what you do, right? But as long as I'm on this planet, I'm going to be annoyed that I got to take off my shoes. We also recognize that because we live in a post-9/11 world, we have to do things differently. Many of you, I'm sure, have participated in evacuation drills, that the buildings, the office buildings that you work in, there has to be there's a plan now in place, because we know that there are many that potentially could have gotten out of the Twin Towers had they realized that there was a real threat going on. We know that there were many people that started going down the stairs that were told to go back. Everything was fine. And so we recognize that there's a new way that we have to even conduct ourselves in having these evacuation drills. I was reminded of something. I don't know how many people remember the blackout that happened in 2003 here in the Northeast. One of the things that was interesting to me about the blackout is the way everyone responded. Because it was post 9/11, everybody had a plan. Like, I watched people just moving, and everybody knew what they wanted to do, what they needed to do. We didn't know if it was a terrorist attack. We didn't know what was going on, but we were clear that we were not going to be stuck. Yes, yes? And so, people did what they needed to do, but that was a recognition that we live in a different world, and so we're responding differently because of that. And it shows me that, human beings are incredibly resilient. Yes, yes? All over this planet, not just us in the U.S. In the U.S., we don't experience the level of incidents as those things that are experienced all over the world. And no matter what, all across the globe, humans adjust. Still, in the midst of terror attacks, still there are birthday parties. Still, in the midst of disaster, there are still weddings. And all of these things are still going on. We just adjust. As humans, we're very resilient. And in truth, then that just becomes another normal part of life, that this is what it is, and this is what we move through, right? And while I recognize that this is a good thing on many levels, it is also something that hurts us. Because while it is important that we learn to adjust to what's happening in the world, we use that same practice in a way that hurts ourselves. Because I believe that as humans, unfortunately, we address everything that happens to us this way. And so if we've experienced abuse in any form, if we've experienced unfair treatment, misogyny, patriarchy, racism, injustice, broken relationships, rape, murder, molestation, family secrets, and on, we do the very same thing. We just adjust. Oh, we got to take our shoes off now. Okay. Oh, I guess we just have to get used to people driving trucks and running people over. Oh, okay. Oh, I guess we have to just get used to someone strapping bombs on them and on themselves and walking into a club or a wedding and just blowing themselves up. Okay. Meanwhile, we haven't dealt with the cause or the root of anything, and so there's no healing. Yes, yes? And so as we recognize that addressing life this way means that we don't heal, we just adjust, we move on, we manage it, and we don't heal because we don't go to the cause. Now, what is the cause in this case? And I'm We're not talking now about these global things, but we're talking about things that happen to us individually or in our families. And I want to say this again so we're clear. Abuse in every form, unfair treatment, misogyny, patriarchy, I'll add homophobia there, racism, injustice, broken relationships, rape, murder, molestation, family secrets, and on and on. We don't heal because we don't go to the cause. Now, the cause is not what happened. That's not the cause. You actually can't change that once it's occurred. But the cause is what we are thinking about what happened. Sit with that for a second. We don't heal because we don't go to the cause. The cause is not what happened. You cannot get in a time machine and go back and change the events. Can't do that. We know that. And because we know that, then that's why we just adjust. It's like, well, I can't go back and make that person do something different. I can't go back and save myself. So I just have to adjust to this new reality that I'm just broken now, that I'm just affected by this thing that happened to me, and I'm just going to walk through life kind of not all together, but I'll make it. I'll just adjust. I'll just get used to taking my shoes off at the airport. But in truth, the cause is what we are thinking. That means that if we heal our mind, we can heal our life. And so today I'm going to talk about how we do that and why we need to do that, but more importantly, just how we do that. So the first thing to know, how do we heal our minds? Well, first we have to get very clear about something. This is New Thought 101. Now, the Kabbalion writes it this way, that the universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. We have to get clear that everything starts from thought. Thought is the first cause. I was talking to the 90 Days to Greatness group. I did a video last night talking about the principle of cause and effect. And so often we look at our lives and we point to things that happen or external events. We point to the government. We point to politicians. We point to our mother. We point to our father. We point to our boss. We point to the bus driver or the subway driver, and we say, they are the reason that I'm feeling this way. They are the reason that I'm experiencing this thing. But that's not true. That's an effect. Cause is always from the realm of thought. So just because the bus driver was sneered at you and wasn't kind, the meaning that we place on that experience is what causes us to feel anything, not what the bus driver did. Because you could actually just still stay in your happy place, be like, sorry for him, and still be happy, right? So we recognize that cause is only mental. And again, so often what we do is we get mixed up because we're looking out here in the world of effects. The world of effects, there's always a mental cause that happens first. And then even think about the things that we do. You had to think about it first, even if it was a split second. There was a signal that comes from your brain that then causes your arm to move. Your arm is not the mover, is not the causer. It receives a signal and then it moves. Anything you do in your life, you receive a thought first, but again, it happens so quickly that we think, oh, I'm just doing this. We're not recognizing the fact that there's a mental cause, but when we recognize that everything is mental, everything comes from mind and can only come from mind, that's where the power is. When we recognize that, then and only then can we begin to change what's going on. So how do we heal? There are stages. And I want to talk about really two aspects that I think are the most important things. So the first part of healing is telling the story. Now, we have that part down. We know how to tell the story. Yes, yes. Now, what's interesting, just in this past month, we had the #MeToo campaign. Yeah, you saw that in social media? And that was all about this first part. It was telling the story, and it was a beautiful thing. So many people friends of mine, people that I've grown up with, for the first time were able to articulate and felt safe enough to be able to say that they too had experienced some form of abuse, some form of just the effects of patriarchy, misogyny, etc. It was beautiful to see that because I recognized that they were taking that first step. Now, there were others who were saying me too for about the 1,000th time. They've been telling the story and telling the story and telling the story. Now, telling the story, again, I said, is the first step. But telling the story is not healing. And so please hear me. I am not in any way criticizing anyone who felt safe enough and who called on that courage within themselves to be able to say, me too, because that was necessary. And we're in a climate right now where, I talk so often about the age of Aquarius being the age of I know, meaning that anything that was hidden before is coming to light. This is why all these stories keep coming about of different people, right? Actors and executives and et cetera, et cetera. This is why it's coming up. The secrets can't be hidden anymore. It's a beautiful thing. And so as that's coming up, this is another part of telling the story, but it's not healing. If you just tell the story, it's not healing. Now let's think about this for a second. Let's look at the context of African Americans. We've been telling the story, y'all. We've been telling the story of slavery. Roots was powerful when it aired in the 70s because the story had never been told in that way before. A lot of people didn't even really know the story or could appreciate the story. Now, one thing about Roots is Roots was just one story. It's not the whole story. I don't know how many people have watched on PBS, Finding Your Roots, Dr. Henry Louis Gates. It's a beautiful program. And one of the things that I love about it is that the narrative about African Americans, enslaved Africans in this country, it's not just one story. Everybody's ancestor wasn't Kunta Kinte. In truth, everybody's ancestor wasn't even enslaved. That's kind of hard to hear, but it's true. Right? Now, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, if you are African American, you can trace it back. Yes, somebody in your family experienced slavery, but everybody didn't. And so there's a different narrative. Many people were freed or bought their freedom well before the Civil War, right? And were able to buy land and create income and wealth for themselves. There was different stories going on, right? So we can't just tell the story as though there was one story, because if we do that, then all of us are in this place of we were slaves, we were enslaved, and then we're living from that consciousness. But as we've told the story, we haven't allowed the next steps of healing to happen. All we're doing, we think in good conscience, and I know that our ancestors did, that to tell the story, that was somehow going to be a good thing. But there was something else that happened. There were many that wouldn't tell the story. My grandmother, she tells me about they would sit at her grandmother's feet. She was named after her grandmother. Her name was Alice. Call her name right now. And she says that, her grandmother would tell them a little bit about slavery. But for many families, they didn't talk about it because it was traumatic. Now, for my brothers and sisters who are Jewish, whose family experienced the Holocaust, you may hear the same thing. Your grandparents, your great-grandparents, they didn't talk about what happened. They didn't talk about what went on. And so what happened then is that all of those memories, of course, are repressed, but they have life in our bodies, right? And so they create dis-ease and they create dysfunction. Yes, yes? When we don't tell the story. The other thing that happens, and it's another great documentary, I love documentaries. On Netflix, there's a documentary right now called One of Us that's looking at the Hasidic community. When you only tell the story, you create what we see with our brothers and sisters. There's nothing wrong with them. They are beautiful human beings, just like us, that are living and loving and wanting to have the best life and have the best life for their children. But the fear and the trauma of the Holocaust, their response to it, tell the story and then close. Tell the story and then create rules and laws and try to protect ourselves, because never again will we let millions of people that look like us be assaulted, be killed, or be murdered in the way that the Holocaust happened. So we recognize that just telling the story or even repressing the story, we're still living in that same place. It doesn't lead to healing. The only thing that happens is it leads to what I just call ugliness, right? It leads to dysfunction. That's a better word, right? And it's interesting about when we live from dysfunction because we're functionally dysfunctional, right? We're walking through the world. We can still, get jobs and we have families and we get married and we may still go on vacations and do all these things. We're functionally dysfunctional. Now, I recognize also that in this telling the story, in Radical Forgiveness, Colin Tipping, there's two sections. First section is telling the story, and the next section is feeling the feelings. They're both part of the same thing. And I recognize that for many of us, we're afraid to tell the story because of the emotion of it. And we actually think that we're being spiritual by not going to those emotions, right? Telling the story, you're supposed to be pissed. Telling the story, if there's anger involved, be as angry as you need to be. Telling the story, if you just want to cry and wail, cry and wail. Why? Because you're telling the story with a purpose. You recognize that this is the last time I will ever wail around this thing. Tell the story because you recognize that all of this emotion, all of this anger, this is the last time that I will feel this in this way because I am only telling the story so that I can heal my mind. That's the only reason I'm telling it. I'm not telling it to get sympathy. I'm not telling it so somebody can say, yes, I experienced that too. I'm not telling it to heal anybody else. I'm only telling it to heal myself. But what's interesting is that when you tell the story just to heal yourself by proxy, by you standing and courageously choosing to tell that story, that's how you're going to give other people permission to heal themselves. But if you go with the idea of I'm telling this story because I want to heal somebody, it doesn't work that way. It has to be about you. Heal your mind, and then you change your life. And then in truth, as you heal your mind, others are changed. Why? Because our minds are joined. As the Course in Miracles says, all minds are joined. So when you recognize that this is a part of the path, I know the emotions, particularly if they've been buried and you haven't talked about it. I know the emotions, and maybe somebody didn't hear you when you tried to talk about it the first time. Somebody didn't advocate for you when you tried to talk about it for the first time. And so the thing about it, when we repress those emotions, they feel stronger just because we've been pushing against them for so long, and they're pushing back saying, I want to get out. I don't belong here. And so that's why it feels so strong. But if you just let go, stop pushing against it, and let it come out, it wants to leave you. The depression wants to leave you. The anger wants to leave you. The shame wants to leave you because none of these things are who and what you are. You remain as God created you. None of these emotions are who and what you are. It wants to leave you. I just know that word is for somebody today. It wants to leave you. It doesn't want to be with you. And so that's why it keeps coming up, so it can leave. So we tell the story, we feel the feelings, and then it is only out of that then we can bring forgiveness to the situation. Now, what is the role of forgiveness? I think forgiveness so often is misunderstood. Now, we've heard it said that forgiveness is for you. It's not for the other person or the other situation. We understand that. Now, why do we understand that? Because all of the feelings, all of the repressed emotions that we have exist only in us, not in the perpetrator, not in the people, not in the experience. They exist only in us. So if we allow those emotions to come up, they can leave us, and now we're free. We understand that, right? But it's also important to understand that the role of forgiveness is the thing that's allowing us to change the meaning that we've applied to whatever the event or experience is. Because you see, as A Course in Miracles teaches us, it says that God does not forgive. Why? Because God does not condemn. Another way to say that is the meaning that we may be holding about a situation, God does not hold that meaning. If God is an unconditionally loving presence, like the sun shines on each and every one of us equally. If I was a murderer, the sun would still shine for me. If I cuss you out, the sun's still going to shine on me. Now, you could be mad and be like, the sun shouldn't shine on Pastor Greg. right? But you recognize that this is kind of how we're operating in our lives, right? That we think that God is condemning this person, and so that's why we're doing it too. But in truth, there is no condemnation in God. God cannot do that. That's against its nature. That's against the nature of love itself, because it holds the truth of who and what we are. So when we're in unforgiveness, we're simply holding a meaning about this event. Many times, of course, we're holding meaning about ourselves, right? What did we do wrong? How we could have not put ourselves in this situation? What we could have done differently, right? And so because we have that meaning, then we live in this place of unforgiveness. We live in this place that can lead us to depression. Now, the other thing about meaning, many times the meaning is rooted in shoulds, right? They shouldn't have done this, or again, I should have or should not have done something. And this is where I love Byron Katie and the work. Because what happens is, I believe it's the third question in the work. Whatever the thought is, if I say, he should not have done that to me, whatever it was, right? Something awful, something terrible. He should not have done that to me. And I believe that thought to be true because I feel it and I know that it was wrong. And the third question in the work says, how do you treat yourself when you believe that thought? What thoughts do you think? What do you say to yourself? What do you say about yourself? How do you operate in the world when you believe he should not have done that? Well, many times then I might be coming to the defense of anybody I see that's also being wronged in the same way that I was, because they shouldn't be doing that. So now I'm out here trying to save the world. You always burn out when you're in that savior role. It doesn't work. We were never designed to be on the cross and save the world. Like, that's not. So I could be doing that. Or, he shouldn't be doing that. So then I'm just mad, right? And every time I see that person, I tense up. Every time I see that person, I'm not myself anymore. People know me as a wonderful, happy, joyous person. But when this person comes around because he shouldn't have done that, now I'm tense. Now I'm angry. Now I'm mean. Now I'm cutting myself off from joy, from having meaningful relationships, from having wonderful interactions because I'm now in this place. How do I treat myself? How do I act? What do I think? But what's interesting then also is when we become aware of those thoughts, we can also see where we judge ourselves in the same way. When we make a mistake, you shouldn't have done that, and we punish ourselves in the worst way. And what's beautiful about radical forgiveness is it's supporting us, the forgiveness worksheets, in coming to that awareness of seeing as we come out of telling the story and feeling the feelings. Then we start to collapse the story. We move towards reframing the story and then reframing the story. Because we recognize what radical forgiveness is offering us is to recognize that our thoughts are what's creating the experience. The experience now. I'm not talking about the events. I'm not talking about what happened again, and I named some very awful things. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about now. Because the past doesn't exist, right? We can't go back. We can't change that. We can't do anything about it, but we can do everything about now. And we can do everything about the thoughts that we're thinking, and we can do everything about the meaning that we've placed upon it. So as we understand that and we start to even see the way that we treat ourselves with our thoughts, then we have the opportunity to heal. And so then we recognize that forgiveness is a tool that so we can heal. Forgiveness is what allows us to come back to ourself. What is yourself? It is perfect. It is whole. It is complete. It remains as God created you. There is a self that you are, your whole self that is unaffected by the events. And forgiveness is the tool that brings us to that point. That's why we have it. It's not for God. It's for us. It's one of your superpowers. Because we recognize we live in this world, we live in this 5-sense world, and things happen, and we place meaning on it, even unintentionally, and then we start to live based on that thing. We need a means to be able to come back to ourselves, yes. We need a means, a loving means that allows us to change the story, to change the condition, to change our minds, and this is what forgiveness allows us to do. I encourage you, and we're happy to send them out. We'll email you to our mailing list, the Radical Forgiveness Worksheets, if you don't already have them. You can also go to Colin Tipping's website to get them. Here at CSC, we understand the power of forgiveness, right? And we understand the power of true forgiveness. This is why we teach A Course in Miracles. And this is why in every class, even if it seems unrelated, these forgiveness worksheets come back up over and over and over again, because it is a perfect example, is a perfect tool to do the first step. And I think the first step is so important. We think it's so unspiritual. We've been taught that it's not spiritual to be pissed off and talk about the story, right? And so for many of us, that's why we've repressed the emotions. Like, oh no, I'm going to be the bigger person. Meanwhile, you have so much resentment swirling in your being. You got so much anger. It's okay to get angry. You just don't act from the anger. It's okay to be angry. Anger, every emotion is good. It's an indicator. But the problem is, because we see anger, and we may have witnessed, could just be in my life, we have witnessed people acting in anger. We've witnessed the destruction of anger. We've witnessed in relationships abuse that was rooted in anger, right? And we've seen that, and we say, oh no, I can't be that. I'm not going to be, if that's what anger is, I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to do that. So then when the emotion of anger shows up in us, we're pushing it back because we're spiritual. We're pushing it back because we think we know better. But what we saw was someone who did not know that anger, acting from anger is destructive, but looking at the anger and using that emotion to allow us, to take us to healing, that's a good thing. So please allow yourself to get pissed off. Be spiritual. Allow yourself to feel the feelings. You will not be taken over by the emotion. Why? Because it doesn't belong to you. It doesn't want to be there. It's coming up so it can leave. This is what you got to tell yourself when it comes up, because you're going to be by yourself and you're going to be, you're going to say, oh, Pastor Greg told me I can tell the story. I'm going to tell the story, but that fear is still going to be there. What you have to tell yourself is this thing is coming up to leave. This emotion is here so it can leave. It doesn't belong here. It is leaving my body. It is leaving every cell of my body. And as I allow it to leave, I'm actually allowing healing on the physical and emotional level. This is why I'm doing it. We recognize, as we sang in the song, heal us forever from our dis-ease. Repressed emotions have to express themselves. Repressed emotions manifest as dis-ease in our physical body unless we release them. Yes, yes? So if there's something going on in your body right now, there's your signal. There's something going on in your body right now, there's your signal. Those repressed emotions that you've been pushing against, that you were too scared to articulate. You have a tool. And this tool will allow you to articulate those emotions, not to live in them, not to tell the same story next year this time, not to tell the same story 5 years from now, but to be done with it once and for all. I was reading, there's a text that I'm looking forward to teaching on next year, A Course of Love, which is the sequel to A Course in Miracles. And there's something in A Course of Love that I love as it relates to healing, a very simple idea. It says that healing and love are the same thing. And so as you're doing your work now, using this forgiveness work, understanding what forgiveness work really is, understanding that there are stages to the forgiveness work. First stage, I'm telling the story, and I'm feeling the feelings, and then I start to collapse the story and move towards reframing the story, and finally I shift and integrate the shift. As I realize this, what I'm really doing is allowing more love. We all want love in our life, yes? We all want to experience more love, right? All of us at different points in our life have been looking outside of ourselves, looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love, right? But the love you seek is the love you are. Use this process to love on yourself. Use this process to heal your mind. As we quoted in the synopsis for this series, A Course in Miracles, it's in the introduction to the workbook lessons. an untrained mind can accomplish nothing. And a trained mind is a healed mind. And so when you heal your mind, when you shift the meaning of whatever the experience is, when you come back to love in your own mind, then you can accomplish anything. When you train your mind back on healing, when you train your mind back on what is true, your eternal nature, that you remain as God created you, that even this event, no matter how horrific it was, no matter how unwanted and unwarranted it was, even that cannot destroy you. This is the symbolic meaning of the story of Jesus and the crucifixion and rising again. The point was, even the most horrific thing that could ever happen to you, and we've all experienced some very horrific things in our lives. I don't care how deep it was or how tough it was. Nothing can destroy you. And when I say nothing can destroy you, I'm not talking about that functional dysfunction. Because that's what we think. But it's like, well, I'm still here. It didn't destroy me. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you can thrive beyond this. That's what I'm talking about. That's the symbol of the Christ rising into all glory and all power, despite something incredibly ugly and despite being wronged by his homies. Despite a person who was actually, Barabbas was a criminal. The criminal was let go. He was put on the cross and assassinated. You want to talk about being wronged? You want to talk about something terrible happening to you? The truth of that story, the symbol of that story is not to look at it literally. It's not to worship Jesus, but it's to understand that the same power that's in him, that's in that story, is in you. So I know you may have been through something very difficult. I know you may have some people in your life that did things that they should not have done. I know that you may have been in experiences that you should have never experienced. But I also know that there's a Christ in you, a consciousness that knows who and what you are, that knows that you're eternal, that hasn't forgotten that. And that's the thing that's calling you forward right now. That is the thing that will heal your mind so that you can heal your life. With that, I invite everybody to stand. We titled this series in the affirmative, Thank You for My Healing. We didn't title it, Let's Talk About Healing. We didn't title it, Hopefully I'll Heal This Time. What we know to be true is that your healing is already accomplished. Hear that. Your healing is already accomplished. So can we affirm right here and now, even if we don't see it and even if we don't feel it, because your feelings are not what dictate your life. You tell your feelings how to feel. Can we affirm right here and right now, thank you for my healing? Thank you for my healing. As you think about the things that you've experienced in your life and you think about the fear that you had in moving through the emotions or telling the story, can you say right here and right now, with this new consciousness, with this new awareness, thank you for my healing? We recognize that the past is over. It can touch us not. We recognize that there is nothing that can hurt, harm us in truth. At our core, we are eternal. At our core, we are the I am that I am. And that is why we say, thank you for my healing. Mother, Father God, I am so grateful and thankful for these beautiful souls, for these powerful and empowered souls that are standing here and now knowing that their healing is inevitable, knowing that their prayers are answered right here and right now, knowing that their wholeness is continuing, that their wholeness has never been broken, that who and what they are can never be severed or separated from their source. Each and every one of you remain as God created you. And as we bring our awareness to this truth, I am so grateful and thankful to be a witness. I am grateful and thankful to be a witness to the healed minds and the healed lives that are coming online right now, that are taking effect. I am so grateful and thankful as I can hear and see the very cells within your bodies begin to come back into alignment with the truth that they are perfect, whole, and complete. I see your cells being freed of the anger and the disappointment and the shame and the blame. I see your cells, the very cells of your body, the very cells in your mind and your brain beginning to heal, for we recognize the truth that even science teaches us that if we tell the story differently and if we speak on it long enough and work towards it long enough, that we actually change the very synapses within our brain. And so right here and right now, I know that even as an adult, your brain can shift. Even as an adult, your brain can change. And so right here and right now, you are creating new neural pathways that say you are healed right now. New neural pathways that say that the past that took place cannot dictate your future. New neural pathways that are saying that I know that I can thrive. New neural pathways that are destroying the idea that you have to be functionally dysfunctional, but that you can actually function and thrive and live and be, enjoy. Right here and right now, the new pathways are being made within your own being, coming back into alignment with your source that is condemning nothing, but is holding your joy in expectation. Your source, which sees you afar off, just as the prodigal son's father saw him afar off, even before he got home. His father sent those out to him to gather him in and put a robe on him and a ring on his finger. So your source is doing the same for you right now. As you have affirmed, thank you for my healing, you have come back to yourself and you are returning home. And home is returning to you. So it is with joy and thanksgiving that I release this prayer, knowing that our word cannot return unto us void. But as surely as we have said thank you in advance, we are living in the doneness of our healing. And as we live in the doneness of our healing, we enjoy it now. As we live in the doneness of our healing, we bask in it now. We savor it now. I am so grateful for the healed minds and healed lives that are here in this space and within the sound of my voice now. And so I release this prayer back into the law, back into the one mind, the one power, the one cause that is always in operation for our good. And we say, amen, amen. Ashe. And so it is. So it is.